allow me to introduce Andy Summers. Well, thank you so much for coming and bringing the film. The first thing that jumps to mind, and I have to ask you, watching that scene where you're filming the spectacle show with Elvis Costello, and Sting is out on stage and he's talking, and you're watching the monitor in the green room. Sting is out on stage talking about he doesn't really want to step in the river more than a couple of times. And there's clearly something going on in your mind as you're watching that, and I'm wondering what it is.
Yeah. Well, it was a sort of cruel thing for the editor to put it in. Yeah. Do you need to redo that, man? I don't know about that, because it's obviously a poignant moment, and I think he all thought it would read that way, like, they're going, oh God, they're so fucked up now, hearing him say that. No, not really. It's just like, get on with it, because we want to get out there and say something.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to actually buy into that. All right, don't step in the same river twice. Who gives a shit?
and yet, no one. And this goes back to, the first time the band broke up. No one ever actually came out and said, "We're done. We're finished." That was, I think, part of the mystique of the band.
Yeah, it was. God, that's loud. Rock and roll. I always thought that was a bit unfortunate. We stopped, and we knew that was it. But we were certainly told by our manager to, don't say anything. Keep your power base. I think that was his term. And I found it actually very frustrating. And we sort of, the mythology was so strong at that time that it wasn't out, and the world was still heavily embracing us. But after about a year or so, I started kind of leaking. At that time, I was doing the sort of WikiLeaks. In advance. But, I felt necessary because otherwise it was dishonest and I felt like I was living a lie. No, we broke up.
Yeah.
And eventually it was sort of hinting at it and then said, no, we've broken up, and then it sort of became public and a lot of people committed suicide, lemmings migrated. It was bad,
One of the great things, you touch on it in the film and you go deeply into it in your book. And by the way, if you've not read One Train Later, I would encourage you to do that, is your experience in London in the mid-'60s, before you ever got to meeting Sting and Stewart.
Well, I was in diapers at that point, yeah. Yes.
But there were a couple of moments, and I have to ask you about the kinds of people you met and got to play with, whether it was Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton, and most specifically, a moment in a studio with Jimmy Hendrix.
Yeah, I did do all that. I was in the psychedelic scene of the 60s in London, so it is kind of hard to remember because it's a sort of acidic blur, if you like. Really true. Amazing time to be, quite young and around all that. It was a wonderful moment, and we're still bathing in it, basically. We're still living in the counterculture. Mm-hmm. And these are all friends of mine. I'd hang out with Eric a lot. Jimmy came to my flat. We played together. I was very much in the sort of inner circle of Jimi Hendrix when he turned up in London, because we were close friends with a group called the Animals, who of course were world famous. And I was in a band called the Soft Machine, who was also managed by Mike. What's his name? Who managed Jimi Hendrix? Mike Jeffries, that's right, Mike Jeffries. And so we were all kind of together, I mean, it was a big city, but it was a very tight scene, and I was right in the middle of all that, with all those people. And, I was around Jimmy a lot. But oddly, we kind of migrated to LA, late 60s, and I did end up not very far from here, actually. Well, actually up in Hollywood. It was a studio on Libre called TTG, I believe. And maybe it was Eddie Kramer asked us to come down, but we went into the studio and in fact, there was Jimmy in, full gale force, with his white Stratocaster. I never forget this walking in, because we walked into the control room, with the glass windows, and Jimmy was leaning up against the glass window, with a hat on with a feather in it, full regalia, and like cranked to the 11. And, it was like, wow, it's like from another planet. It was quite something,
I mean,
it was
the power was palpable.
It was palpable and, tangible. It was a force, and he was it. And, but he was just fully in it, and it was like, playing left-handed. It's bizarre. But there he was, and then he finally stopped, and he came in, and he was a very shy, very soft-spoken person. He was very sweet, very friendly, and we all chatted for a bit. And then I went out into the studio, because I, knew Mitch very well from London, and Mitch was sitting around and sort of twiddling about on the drums. It must have been another guitar, a right-handed guitar, because I picked up a Les Paul, I believe, and I started jamming with Mitch, and we were just playing away, and then and Jimmy walked out and picked up the bass, and he started just jamming along, and then, we're jamming away, and I'm playing and lead, and Jimmy's on bass, and so I think, Jesus, there's Jimmy Hendrix playing bass with me. Ooh! Because at this time he was always like beyond a legend. Everybody, every guitar player in the world was like bowing to Jimmy. So it was kind of a freaky moment, but he was very cool, and he was playing the bass. And eventually he said, "Hey man, do you mind if I play a little guitar for a while?"
Oh, yeah.
Dude, take it, yeah. But it was great, yeah. That was actually the last time I saw him, but it was a sweet moment. But I was around him quite a few times, and very soft. He was always with the guitar.
Sure.
I was in, apartments, flats in London with him, and he was always lying on the bed with a guitar, basically. That was his thing,